Hey, everybody, welcome back to the next episode. And on this episode, we have Casey Dworkin with us. And she was born on Earth Day, which is actually quite cool to tell you the truth. And then she's been dedicated to sustainable practices from a young age as a result, often joking that sustainability is in her blood. It's kind of true,
Right.
right? Her creative interests led her to pursue fashion, and she completed a degree from Drexel University in a combination of product design and fashion merchandising. Her alma mater, is that how you pronounce that?
Yeah, alma mater. Yeah.
Alma mater recently recognized her for her work in sustainable shoe design and production in their under 40 profile. Separate from her love and reverence of nature, she has also spent the past 15 years working in the fashion and retail industries within a variety of emerging shoe and accessory brands. Welcome.
Thank you. How are you today?
I'm great, thank you. I'm very excited to go through your business and talk about everything you're doing. And we had a bit of a discussion before, and you can tell we're into the same things.
Totally.
Yeah, totally, right? So tell us a little bit of background about you. You know,
Sure.
you're from New York right now. You're in LA building stuff, but tell us a little bit about you and how you got to where you got to today and what you're doing.
Totally. So my name is Casey, founder, designer, creative director at Sylven, New York. I've been in fashion for the last 15 years. I've been in footwear for the last 10. I decided when I was around 19 years old, I wanted to be a shoe designer, and I have not stopped working towards that goal since. I've now had my brand, my own shoe line for 5 years. But I grew up, as you mentioned, I'm born on Earth Day. And so I was super into trying to be as sustainable as possible, well before anyone even really used sustainable and fashion in the same sentence. So I never knew that I could have those two things in alignment. I always just figured, okay, I'll organize recycling. I helped my school figure out how to recycle when I was young, and was organizing community cleanups. And separately was super enamored by luxury fashion. So I was trying to find a really cool designer line to work for and enter the fashion industry. Never realizing that like you could have a cool designer line that was sustainable and that was really focused on being values aligned and values driven. So I worked a couple years in the industry, helping people really build small businesses. I launched and relaunched a couple of small shoe lines. And so I got a kind of amazing landscape of skill sets. My first few years, I didn't design anything. I actually started as an operations and sales person. So I was overseeing shipping logistics and warehousing, and then traveling to trade shows. So really getting like a whole scope of work of what it takes to run a shoe business, and sometimes what it takes not to run a shoe business. And then decided at the right time, probably a little earlier than I planned, which, there's never the right time, that this brand that I dreamt of, luxury and having a really beautiful design forward company, but that was also really rooted in nature and coincided with nature, and was sustainable and gives back. And, all of the laundry list of dream items that I wanted didn't exist. So I decided to launch my own brand, and Sylven, New York was born.
Wow, that's so cool. So tell us a little bit about, when you launched the brand.
Mhm.
Tell us a little more about the brand.
Totally. So I started, 5 years ago, it's 2017. I was not yet a vegan shoe line, which I always like to talk about, kind of this origin story. So I am currently, as we sit in 2022, I'm a fully vegan, fully plant-based shoe company. So right now I'm working with amazing new materials. One of my biggest materials I work with is called apple leather. It's made from organic apple food waste, and I'm sure we can circle back to it. But
Oh, that's quite cool.
it's I love talking about it too. I feel like that's my soapbox speech these days, is all about apple leather and how it's made.
Right.
But 5 years ago, there were no plant leathers, so I wanted to make a shoe line that was as minimally impactful on the planet as possible. And so I looked at some vegan materials, and at the time I could use like either recycled cotton, which, being based in New York, if you want to make a cotton boot for someone in winter, like, you're out of your mind. Like, it's gonna get wet, you're gonna get cold, like there's functionality just isn't there.
Yeah.
And so the vegan leathers that existed, like 95% of vegan leathers still today, are fully plastic. So there's super fossil fuel derived, Vegan leather itself is not a sustainable material. There's lots of arguments and nuance that, even plastic could still be better for the planet than an animal derived material because of all of the harmful practices of the leather industry. But I wasn't yet willing to work with just something that was purely plastic, just didn't meet my sustainable criteria. So I really my line developed as some of these material developments came out. So it was 2019. I had really had my ear to the ground of trying to find and source sustainable vegan alternatives. And I started to hear rumors about new plant-based innovations. And the second I could source it, I jumped on the opportunity. And I became one of the first US brands to work with apple leather. And at the time I was working with vegetable tanned genuine leathers. So things that were we were sourcing from the meat industry in Italy, which is where I produce. So all of our tanneries and the farms where the cattle that were raised were super close to where I was producing. So it was a traceable supply chain, but it was not a vegan supply chain. And I was really looking to get away from that. So we introduced some of these new plant leathers. I tested an apple leather boot. And at the time, I also made a leather version, identical. It was the same style. And we would offer vegan and leather versions and kind of use it as a test grounds to say, especially the shoe industry can get a bit old school. And I had a lot of people tell me leather is equated with luxury. So if you want the luxury customer, you have to offer them a leather product. And I really got to disprove that theory firsthand, where if I literally have the exact same boot made in the exact same luxury Italian factory. One's made of apples, one's made out of calf skin. People didn't care about the material as much as they cared about the color or the backstory. Of course, a sustainable vegan customer 10 out of 10 times is going to go for the apple leather. But we talked about this a little bit ahead of our call here, is getting a non-vegan customer to try something vegan. Like apple leather was just an amazing opportunity to switch something in someone's wardrobe because they're excited about the story, or maybe they just like the color of the boot that I'm making. But it's been a cool journey, and the line has evolved as the landscape for materials has evolved. And now we no longer have any need to use any animal derived products in our whole supply chain. And we are fully vegan and plan to be forever.
Wow, that's amazing. Great job.
Thank you.
Congratulations. So what's been one of the biggest challenges starting that type of business and starting to grow it?
Yeah, I think, there's challenges across there's so many different facets of building a business. And, we love to talk about the design and all the sexy parts of footwear and fashion. But honestly, I'm designing maybe 5% of the time, and the other 95% is business and operations and marketing, production. And it was quite challenging to find the right factory partners who were willing to work with a new material. That took a little longer, setting up the supply chain,
Okay.
and trying to find, I work with family owned factories, and I went to a couple different factories in Italy who kind of rolled their eyes at me when I said I wanted to work with Apple, and they were like, oh, I don't want to work with your synthetics, and, just didn't get the vision. And
Right.
I think that's true not only of, your factory partners, but finding aligned partnerships everywhere. I'm still finding currently, and I'm excited for this to be changing in the near future, but getting retailers on board has been a big challenge, because everyone says they're interested, but everyone is still a little bit everyone wants the proof of concept. So I think it's really easy for people to adopt a practice, but putting that practice in motion and really saying this is something we buy into. Our consumers are telling us that they want a sustainable vegan product. But I think that mentality is certainly going to be shifting. And I'm excited for that to kind of take form in the next few years.
Right. Yeah, I can see that too. So is it are the retailers kind of sitting back and waiting and kind of watching what the consumers are doing right now? Is that what
I
they're
think
doing?
so. I think so. And I think retail has, it certainly was affected incredibly heavily by the pandemic. And so
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of fallout, and the retail industry in general over the last decade. It's been tough. It's a tough market to enter. Everyone always wants to see that you're a big brand, that you're going to bring the following. But I think that brands can bring a lot to the table. It doesn't always just have to be a huge Instagram following. We talked about brands being a movement. And I think it's important that, for these brands that are making claims that they've got all these sustainability goals and things, targets they're trying to reach by 2025, 2030. It's great. what are you doing to put that into practice? And who are
Right.
the brands you're supporting that are actually going to help you achieve those goals?
Yeah, it's so true. So right now, so the company's been in business, what, 5 years now?
Yeah.
5 years. So did you raise money, self-funded? How did that all come about?
I've been bootstrapped and kind of self-funded. I had a little bit of a friends and family round these last few years,
Right,
and I
right.
am officially raising. So I just opened up my first capital raise as we speak. So that's been my other. Everyone always says fundraising is a full-time job. I've been fundraising, and I'm here in LA. I've been doing pop-ups and stuff. So yeah, revenue's been a great thing from retail and from doing kind of launching through my own channels. But I've got some really big dreams and some big goals and some big plans. So I'm excited to be taking my brand kind of to the next level and opening that up for some bigger growth.
Right. That's awesome. That's awesome. So where do you see the industry going with sustainable fashion and specifically in the footwear
Yeah.
industry?
I mean, what I want to see versus what I think we will see, I think it's still going to take a little bit of time for the industry to adopt. I think a lot of people are keen to say that they're willing to make certain changes in their supply chain, but it's expensive. And I think at the end of the day, people always want to take the shortcut and the easy way out. And it's a spend issue as well. So in the greater scheme of things, the industry does seem to be moving towards plant-based and vegan offerings, but I'm curious to see like how are people and how are industries and brands going to do that authentically. And there's every company from H&M all the way up to Hermes is talking about adopting certain plant-based materials. We're seeing a huge boom in mushroom leather, there's a couple different companies that are working on mycelium based materials, and it's so fascinating. It's one of my favorite subjects is material innovation. And there's some big partnerships that are happening. And so I see the industry is already working on it, but I think at the moment it's sort of like people are looking for kind of these little like marketing blips where
Right.
they're like, come to us, we're going to be the first, And I really want the industry to do it. We talk about sustainability in terms of impact, but sustainability in terms of like longevity. How do you set something up so that it actually sustains itself? And I would love to see sustainability be sustained in the fashion industry.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. Do you believe that, I mean, I guess if a brand is actually, like H&M say, trying to do some good, but do you believe, and what's your take on this is like, let's say you got a brand here and they create a department that's doing good, but then their other side of their department is
Yeah.
completely like unethical, unsustainable,
Yeah.
what's your take on that?
It's a real tough one. I don't know if we're allowed to like even, I mean, I know I used H&M as the example, so I guess I can stick with them. That's a really tough call because yeah, in terms of there's H&M's gotten in trouble for not paying garment workers and for mass producing, overproducing. Like
Right.
it's you cannot call yourself a sustainable business if you do not treat the garment workers and the laborers and the employees fairly, right? Like fair trade and being compensated properly is a
Right.
huge part. Like sustainability extends to people, planet, animals. There's a lot under that umbrella. Do I think that it's better to do some good than no good? Absolutely. But do I think that you can call yourself a sustainable brand just because you launched a conscious collection? No, I don't.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I'm with you on that. That's always a fine area
Yeah.
too. And that's a fine area of, is the company just doing it for
Yep.
marketing to
Yeah.
try and get into that crowd? And do they,
Yeah.
are they doing it for the right reasons or the
It's
wrong
tough.
reasons?
But then you think about intention versus outcome. So, maybe their intention is just marketing and they're not in it for the right reasons. But the outcome of that is that people who weren't even aware of sustainability in fashion are now hearing about it at a level that they
Yeah.
wouldn't have if just some of these niche or only the luxury fashion itself, which is, luxury is specifically inaccessible, right? Like it's about that exclusivity. So I think there still is something positive to be said about starting a conversation in a bigger way, and kind of using that platform for good. But it does get a little dicey because it's, you can't necessarily give them all of the merit, but I think it's important to call out the greater benefits that do come from it. call that the
Yeah.
silver lining.
Yeah. I'm with you on that,
Yeah.
100%. What do you think is one of the biggest challenges for an entrepreneur?
Oof. There's a lot of them. I think it's just to keep going. I think there's a lot of, we always talk about the high highs and the low lows. I think one of the biggest challenges is like really understanding the vision where it is that you're moving towards, and just keeping forward with that mission. Just,
Right.
that kind of like tunnel vision.
Yeah.
You get sidetracked and things kind of come in and out, but once you really see where you're going, it's like you just got to keep steadfast, and things are gonna come in and kind of shake you off course, and it's just like you just stick to the path.
Yeah, right. Do you think there's any certain skill sets that an entrepreneur must have to make a business
That's a
successful?
tough one. I joke, I think entrepreneurs are all a little bit masochistic, because I think that we just like enjoy the challenge and the struggle in some kind of weird way. I don't know if you agree with that.
Yeah. Mhm.
But I think it's ultimately like, that feeling of accomplishment and achievement that we are seeking, because it's sort of like, once you hit a goal, it's like immediately replaced with a bigger goal. So it's sort
Yeah,
of that, like, you need that, like, what is it, sharks that only swim forward. Like, you need
right.
to be, I don't want to say a shark in terms of like, you're not trying to, like, pull anything over on anyone, but you need to have that kind of quality of like, you're ready to take it on even when it hurts you.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree with that. I think you're right on the goals, and keep setting them for entrepreneurs. For me, when my hockey kind of days ended, right? I never, I played hockey my whole life. And then when it ended, I never stepped on skates again for another 15 years,
Wow.
because to me it was kind of boring now. Like, just
Mhm.
even watching other people and stuff, like there was no goal of trying to make it to the next league, the next division for me, that was over. So to me
Yeah.
now it was kind of like, this is kind of boring now. And then I found business. And then
Yeah.
business to me was like, it was exactly like hockey to me. It was the
Mhm.
same thing. You got to set a goal, you got to get here, you got to figure it out, you got to get better, and stuff like that,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
it's the same thing. Yeah. Um, so that's cool. So, with you kind of growing the company and stuff, where are you, do you have, I know you can be more of a one person business, but are you trying to grow employees now? Are you trying to bring on more people? What's your kind of like vision of scaling the company, I guess?
Yeah, we've been super lean to start. So like I have one employee that's full time at the moment. It's kind of the two of us. And then I have an amazing head of production in Italy. So
Right,
like I work with some contractors and some agencies, but like my team is really like three-ish people, kind of
right.
two and a half, depending on, kind of how you calculate it. I would love to build out a bigger team. I think we're going to be a lot more effective, and I think we'll have a much further reach. And that's definitely within my plan for these next few years. But I don't plan to like bring on, like, I'm not going to go from 0 to 60, like,
Yeah, yeah,
even in terms of employees, right? Like I'm much closer to 0 employees than I am to 60
yeah,
employees.
yeah.
But it's like key hires. I think I happen to have a huge wealth of knowledge, which sometimes I think almost hinders me. It's like, if you can do everything yourself, doesn't mean you should. So
True.
I think it's I'm constantly learning new lessons of like, okay, it would be really helpful if I had another person to delegate this to, so I
Yeah.
could actually focus on, the design work of, developing a new collection or whatever it is I might be doing. So yeah, I would love to expand my team, but I still want to keep it pretty lean
Yeah.
as I grow and kind of scale organically.
Yeah, I love what you just said there, because that's such an important part. And I see that in so many entrepreneurs, and even businesses that I've helped. I see so many of the owners kind of do the same thing like you just said, and that is they're trying to do everything themselves,
Yeah.
right? Because they know they can execute on certain things, and
Yeah.
not stepping back and understanding, okay, like if I, even was paying, an assistant from the Philippines $5 an hour
Yeah.
and train them properly, they could be executing this for me.
Yeah,
And
I
just
hear amazing things about virtual assistants, if that's kind of the path you're thinking in terms of like, kind of an external some external help. But yeah, I agree. And it's a hard lesson. And sometimes I don't realize until I'm doing it that I'm like, oh, I don't need to be doing this task. I can ask someone else to help me with this. And I think it's just that general awareness too. And just kind of, you get used to your situation. I've been essentially running a business as, you know, I'm a solo founder. So for the last 5 years, I have had to do a lot of different tasks that much larger companies, you know, I almost think it's funny when I hear about other people's structures. I'm like, you have a whole person that just does that? Like, what a luxury. I'm like, oh, I could probably set myself up for that as well. Like, that's not an anomaly. That's just how, you know, it's growth.
It's true. It's true. It's looking at it and working to get there, and I always say, like, in ours company and other things, I say, like, you got the CEO, you got
Mhm.
and then let's say you've got marketing, or you've got more operations, or you got, this and this. And I always tell people, like, for a while, that you're going to have to stop the CEO hat and put on the marketing hat, and then
Exactly.
put this hat on, then put this hat on, put this hat on. But it's understanding how much time you're starting to spend in each one, and then starting to really look and say, okay, what would be my perfect next hire? Like, if I could have that to take care of this, perfect.
Exactly.
And then my third, and then my fourth, and then my fifth.
Mhm.
Like, that's how I've always done it. Like, even virtual assistants. I mean, think I got three now that work
Cool.
for me, outside my other media teams, right?
Right.
But two of them just take care of my schedules, my agendas, everything, even making sure, like, following up and, like, seeing, okay, yeah, Shane, like, the guys and the girls, they got that deck done and this got done, and just making sure nothing drops through the cracks,
Yeah.
type of thing, right? All the time. And I've been able to figure out how to produce that, as in, I always say like this: if I can, if that person comes in and that person can 5x even my money, then it's a good investment.
A great investment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's how I always look at it, right? If I can, if it's looking and it's 5xing, and I'm like, okay, that's working.
Yeah.
But there's other ones where we've tried, and I'm like, put somebody there, tried that, and I'm like, ah, that just ain't working. That's just not being a good return on my money right now at all. So it's
Yeah.
just not where it's at, right? But so yeah, I think that's a great point you brought up, because I think that'll help even a lot of business owners listening right now, because I think they don't step back enough
Yeah.
and really look at that, and don't step back enough. And I come from franchising, so I understood the importance of systems and processes, and
Yeah.
why it was so important in everything you do.
Yeah.
And
And it's tough. And it's particularly tough when you're bootstrapped, you know, because a lot of the time that small businesses and entrepreneurs and business owners are doing everything is because we can't afford to pay other people to do it yet. You know, it's sort
yeah,
of you're getting the business to a certain place, but then you're sort of on this hamster wheel.
yeah,
And so something else that I've had to do, especially through this, you know, we have this global pandemic that we are still in the midst of. It really helped me just kind of take a look at my plate and figure out, like, okay, if I'm only, instead of doing 10 things, I'm going to do 3 things. And if those 7 other things just don't get done at all, like, what's the actual overall impact on the business?
right.
So, and you know, if there's things that you can't hire out, just sometimes I'm like, okay, that's a future that's like I would like to have.
Yeah.
And the must-haves are maybe the things that I'll work on in the meantime, or delegate if I can. But I think that's the struggle really, is the, you know, if we could all hire people to do things, I'm sure many of us would. But it's just sometimes it's doing less, you know, cross the things off that are not immediately necessary to move forward.
Yeah, I like that point. It's true. That's good decision making, understanding
Yeah.
what to work on and what not to work on.
Yeah. And
Right.
sometimes you don't realize till you're like halfway through it and you're like, why am I so stressed out and trying to make a, like, also self-imposed deadlines kind of make me laugh, because sometimes I impose deadlines on myself because I think they'll work with a campaign launch or things. And I'm like, no one's sitting here waiting for me to do this thing. So if it's stressing me out more than it's going to benefit me when it's done, maybe it needs to get cut. So sometimes it's a preemptive decision, and sometimes it's like all right, let's do like a self-awareness check. Where are we right now and what do we need to be doing?
Yeah, that's good. That's such an important thing, to be able to step back. And that's really, stepping back and looking more top down in on the business, instead of being
Yeah,
always stuck in the business. I think
absolutely.
small business owners get so stuck inside the business all the time that they forget that it's extremely important to step out and put your
Yeah,
CEO hat on, and be able to drive it properly to get it to that next level.
totally.
You
And it's
know,
even just a matter of being in that mindset, like giving yourself time, because it's impossible, you know, when you've got your tunnel vision, you're only swimming forward. Like, you have to actually stop and say, okay, wait, let me pause let me switch my way of thinking. And it's like, honestly, it's just making, even if it's 10 minutes to think about what you're doing instead of just working on execution.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Step back. And I always say, it's sometimes when you step back and you start now taking time for those little details. And sometimes it's for entrepreneurs, because you're so much moving, you don't think they're important, but you're like, okay, like, as much as stepping back and being like, okay, even if this is, if this is the right strategy, what's our next three, if you look at our calendars, you would
Mhm.
see our next innovative campaigns
Yeah.
consistently mapped out and why. And that's just strategy. That's all it is. One might work, one might not work. One might work, one might not work. One might work, one might
Right.
not work. One might work okay.
Yeah.
So it, but it's all mapped out. So it's down. So we know we'll execute it and see what happens. If it works, we just scale it. We just get it
Exactly.
bigger. A
Yeah.
good example with us is even on this podcast. I mean, when we started doing the business podcast, I never even thought about just doing a vegan podcast because we had other businesses on this.
Yeah.
But as more and more vegan businesses were coming on, and of course I connect with that crowd at such a high level,
Yeah.
I was like, you know what? Let's just put this all on this side and let's do another podcast that's just all vegan. Like, that's it. This is what all we're going to do.
Yeah.
So, and then we looked at it and we're like, okay, let's map a whole strategy around this now. Why this, how this is going to work and stuff like that. But, it shows sometimes when you just keep pulling the trigger that, all of a sudden you start to figure things out a little more.
Totally. Totally.
So what advice could you give somebody just starting a business? Because you went through the startup, and the startup's always the hardest. It's hardest part.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like it's super important to just have a sense of who it is that you are as a company, as a brand. Because I mean, this is kind of a perfect parlay. Like, you didn't start out only interviewing vegan businesses until you did. I didn't start out only working with vegan and plant-based materials until I did. But the general principles, I think for both of us, were there of, the building blocks of how I built out Sylven, New York, and, what the values that were really important to me. I feel like you got to get as clear of a vision as of what you want to do in your brain as you can. And once it makes sense in your head, then I feel like you start to explain it to other people. You get other people to kind of explain it back to you. See if you're on the same page with things. And then it's sort of that, like, you just keep going. That's some of the best advice I've gotten. It's like, I joke, I feel like my dad and I have had this conversation where, like, people always say things look like they just happen and they're really easy and that things work out. And it's not always that they do. It's just that you just keep going until you have done some iteration of what it is that you're working towards. It's that tenacity of you just keep going to try and find a way to make it work. And if it's not one way that you tried, it's, maybe there's three other options that you didn't think of, but it's just you keep making it happen. You keep going forward.
It's true. I like that because, there's been so many things that we've tried that I was way more sure on that didn't work. And then
Yeah.
something else we tried over here. And
Yeah.
I was like, I don't know. And then it completely worked way better. Like,
Yeah.
it's very interesting how that happens.
It is. And as long as you're kind of, be that authenticity too of, everything, if it's authentic to you as a person and you as a brand, then it's something worth pursuing.
Yeah, 100%. Right. If it's not going to harm anything else, why not give it a shot if you think it might work?
Totally.
Right.
Totally. And this is my favorite thing to talk about with, or like my favorite thing about being an entrepreneur and, with people who are just starting to, even if it's an inkling idea, like, if you can't think about doing anything else but that idea, then that's what you should do.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. I always kind of laugh at that because people say that to me. They're like, well, what are you passionate about? Like, what are you exactly passionate about just doing? And for me, it was always been a little different because I was like never passionate about as much about, like, when I got in the fitness industry, I was super in shape.
Yeah.
But people thought that I got in there because I was in shape and I was into fitness, but that actually was not the truth. And
Yeah.
you would kind of think like, well, why would you get into it? Because I had researched all the franchises coming out and which ones were not heard of yet. And
Mhm.
I was trying to predict which one was going to go national, because I
Yeah.
knew if I could predict that before it went national, it would be huge success for us. And I actually had Curves and Home Instead Senior Care.
Uh-huh.
Those were the two that I was picking to do. So the moral of that story is, for me, I'm just passionate about business, like the entrepreneurship of like,
Which
it's
is a
anything. It
perfectly
could like,
wonderful passion. Yeah.
yeah, like you could put me in a shoe company. I'm like, okay, let's figure it out. Let's do this and this. Or you could put me in a, I guess I wouldn't go into anymore like a McDonald's, you know what I mean? I won't build a
Yeah.
McDonald's nowadays,
Yeah.
right? You know what I
Yeah.
mean, right? But any, business that does something good,
Yeah.
in
There's
the world.
certainly some great vegan fast food chains out there now.
Yeah, I've just, we don't have any in Canada at all.
Ah,
At
maybe not
all.
yet. Okay.
Yeah, at all. I've been kind of dabbling around and looking at a few and being like, I wouldn't mind. What's that big one called? There was one that came out in New York, actually, your area. I
Mm.
forget.
There's one that has very similar branding to McDonald's that I can't think about the name of, where it's sort of that red and yellow. Do you know which one I'm talking about?
Yeah, I just heard, you know what? I just heard about them about a week ago, and it's
Yeah,
like a completely spin-off kind of McDonald's, a play on that.
exactly.
I want to
Yeah.
find that one. That's quite
Um,
interesting.
there's a really great one called Plant Power.
Right, yeah.
I had the good fortune of having a lovely conversation with their CEO recently. Super fun, funny, brilliant guy. So maybe Plant Power will come to Canada next.
Plant Power, yeah. Are they franchising, do you know?
That's a good question. I can certainly reach out and ask.
Yeah, yeah. I wouldn't mind looking at that.
Yeah.
Cool, awesome. So we'll wrap it up. How do you keep yourself motivated?
Ooh, by taking breaks and doing things that are not just business. So, it's going for walks, cooking. I love to cook. Like giving myself time in my brain that is not just like business, shoes, plants, vegan. Like,
Yeah, right,
taking a step back so I could take a step forward.
right. Totally. I agree. Awesome. So where can they all find you at? Like website, social media, anything?
Yeah. So you can find me. My website is www.sylvennewyork.com, and it's Sylven and then New York spelled out. And that's our handle for everything. So on Instagram, we're at Sylven New York, Twitter, Sylven New York, everywhere where you social media, you can find us at Sylven New York.
Cool. So go check her out, buy some shoes,
Yes, please help
right?
save the planet, help save the animals, and have a beautiful pair of shoes in your wardrobe.
Exactly. You can't go wrong with that, right?
Absolutely.
Awesome. All right, everybody, take care.
Thanks so much.